First of all, I would like to apologise that my friend Jake could not make it to this video, as he has eaten too much turkey and has slipped into a food coma. But with that being said, we're going to talk about the films of 2019, specifically the top 10 films of 2019. Now, I'm a massive film buff and I go to the cinema quite often, but I couldn't see every film. So, for example, if I leave out films that you love, I'm sorry, this is a personal, biased top 10. And without further ado, let's start off with number 10. Number 10 is a film called Stan and Ollie. It was directed by John S. Bird, and the reason for this placement on the list is because I let my heart rule over my head. Because this film is a true story about two British comedians back in the 1940s, 1950s, and it's something that I used to watch a lot with my granddad, who I lost nearly 2 years ago now. And it was something that I remember telling him was in the pipeline about Laurel and Hardy, starring Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly. And he was quite excited for it, and unfortunately he was never around to actually view it. And when I went, it was a very lovely experience to see how John C. Reilly and Steve Coogan brought these two characters from my childhood to life. And yeah, they did it absolute justice, and it was such a lovely, heartwarming film to watch. Number 9 is John Wick Chapter 3, directed by Chad Stahelski. And I absolutely adore action films, and this film was insane. The action was insane, but bordering on the point of stupidity. I have never been in a cinema with people laughing and clapping at what they're seeing on the screen, especially in the more dumb moments. It was just such a surreal experience, and Keanu Reeves just nails it as John Wick, the super action hero, unbeatable god mode, cheat code badass that he is. And yeah, this is the best of the three so far. There's another one coming in 2021, which I'm very much looking forward to. My number 8 pick goes to Knives Out, directed by Rian Johnson. I'm someone that actually really enjoyed The Last Jedi, so controversial opinion there. But I think some people would see this as an improvement on The Last Jedi. It was a little bit jarring to see Daniel Craig doing an American accent, a southern American accent at that. But it was a very good Agatha Christie style whodunit with some shocking twists, which is what you want in a really good mystery murder film. And it had a stellar cast as well. Daniel Craig, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Chris Evans. Bill Hader, I believe, was in it as well. So it's a really good whodunit. Recommend. Number 7 is Fighting With My Family, directed by Stephen Merchant. It's a British film about a British wrestler, Paige, applying and trying to make it in the big leagues of WWE. And while I do like wrestling, it's not just that, it's also the story of family, and it's quite a good comedy as well in parts. It's a very touching story about family, as you'd probably guess, and it's a pretty good commentary on the way that WWE used to treat women back in the day. And it's something that I'd recommend if you like films such as Little Miss Sunshine and, you know, those kind of feel-good British films, What We Did on Our Holidays and stuff. It's not just a film for wrestling fans. Number 6 is a film called Blinded by the Light, directed by Gurinder Chadha. She was the same person that directed Bend It Like Beckham all those years ago, and Slumdog Millionaire, so you're expecting quality. But basically the story of a Pakistani kid in Luton dreaming to be like Bruce Springsteen one day, and it's such a there's a recurring theme of heartwarming family. If you like East is East, this is East is East with a little bit of Bruce Springsteen thrown in, and, you know, for good measure. You can't go wrong with a bit of the boss. But it's such a wonderful film, and it's a heartwarming. A cast of relatively unknown people apart from Rob Brydon, arguably. But yeah, Blinded by the Light, recommend 100%. Number 5 is Spider-Man Far From Home, directed by John Watts. Spider-Man is one of my favourite Marvel superheroes of all time. Always has been since I was a child. And I do like the Raimi trilogy. I'm not very keen on the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy, but this is the Spider-Man that I see the most in the comics. This 16, 15-year-old lad who is portrayed magnificently by Tom Holland. He did it in Homecoming, but somehow he's one-upped himself in Far From Home. And Mysterio was always one of my favourite villains, so having Mysterio finally in live action Spider-Man universe is just something wonderful to see. And yeah, I just love Marvel movies. My number 4 pick is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed by the legendary Quentin Tarantino. I just absolutely love the character dynamic between Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, that they bounced off each other in this film. It's a film that's about 2.5 hours long, and not an awful lot happens until the last 40 minutes. But in that 40 minutes, for one, you're absolutely blindsided by action. But in that 2.5 hours, 2 hours before the action, you are just engrossed in the friendship of these two because it's so genuine. And it's just absolute love letter to films gone by. It felt like something that should have been made in the 70s, 80s rather than in 2019, and I think that's what Quentin Tarantino was going for. It's not as good as his other works like Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs and Django Unchained as a later one, but it beats Hateful Eight. But it's a bloody fantastic film. You should probably go watch that as well. Number 3 is a film called Rocket Man. It's directed by Dexter Fletcher. It's the biopic of Elton John, Reginald Dwight. And I was also someone who loved Bohemian Rhapsody in 2018, but I wished that they'd delve a bit deeper into the darker elements of Freddie Mercury's story because there was a lot there. But the AIDS and the drug addicts and stuff, that was sort of glossed over, and I was a little bit disappointed by that. But this film is an absolute warts and all documentary style life of Elton John, his highs and his lows, and you have no idea how low some of those lows get. And the musical numbers in it feels on purpose like a musical. And I think that's the idea. Everything's meant to feel like a musical because that's the absolute flamboyance that Elton John was. And it's just captured so perfectly. And I think it's much better than Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm not sure how many other people would agree, but that's mainly be down to Taron Egerton, who played Elton John, not just perfectly, but also sang perfectly. And I get that Rami Malek couldn't do Freddie Mercury's voice because no one else can do Freddie Mercury's voice than Freddie Mercury. But Taron Egerton recreating Elton John's voice, it sounds brilliant. And it's just a film. Watched it about 4 or 5 times now. I just never get tired of it. Slight shock here. Number 2 is Avengers Endgame. Directed by the Russo brothers. Endgame, what can I say that hasn't already been said about Endgame? It's just the most incredible culmination of a saga, but it's just something that it's history. When I came out of that cinema, I felt like I'd witnessed history in the making because it was such a unique experience. It was just so surreal, and it sends off and sets up characters perfectly, and everyone in that film is just phenomenal. And I don't know anyone who hasn't enjoyed seeing Endgame yet. Number 1 is Joker, directed by Todd Phillips, who I only previously knew from the Hangover trilogy, and when I found out that he was doing a Joker movie influenced by a Martin Scorsese film, I was thinking going to be awful. But thankfully it was incredible, and that's probably down to its lead actor Joaquin Phoenix, who is my all-time favourite actor. Joker has become one of my favourite films. Just the idea of someone being beaten down and broken to the point that they snap. That can happen to anyone, and Joker's the sort of thing that proves it. Joker has such a wonderful aura to it because it's not a Joker film. It's a story of a man who in the last half an hour becomes the Joker, and then it ends. People have been so divisive over it, and it's become one of the highest rated R-rated films of all time because it's just such an incredible experience. I think I went and saw it in the cinema 6 or 7 times, and that's because it has shock factor and the violence is so crunchy. You know, you can watch a war film and see people being gunned down, and you know, no one will bat an eye. It's not realistic, but the murders in Joker, it's just absolutely jarring, especially that bit in the subway where the gunshots ring out. It's just shocking. It takes you by surprise, and it's very Scorsese-like, which is what Todd Phillips wanted to achieve. So hats off to him, and Joker is my number 1 film of 2019, potentially all time. So that's it for the top 10 of 2019. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm sorry about my constant use of the word wonderful, and I'm sorry if your film's not on the list. I know there's some absolute classics such as Booksmart, Ford versus Ferrari, but I just didn't get around to seeing them, so I can't put a film that I haven't seen on the list, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, like and subscribe, I guess.